This is the compiler for CS202 final assignment, and here I am adding functions into the compiler. In the README that is attached to one of the assignments, I have the type of inputs and the run test that it passed, and then I also have the limitations and future work. So the limitations of this is I wasn't able to actually get multiple tests to run. I got the simplified version with the add one function, and that works fine. And the limitation is that I can't do if statements or recursive calls. And I also noticed that the C2 language does not work anymore, so I was going to go back through and try to re-implement that into it, but didn't have time. And then anonymous functions, I ran out of time. Going through the compiler, there wasn't actually too much I had to change in the later part of the code. It was a lot to do with the RCO and the type checking that took a bit of time. So in the type checker, I had to add a couple passes for the function definition to turn it into a function type for the inputs and outputs of that function. And then in the TC statement, I added a function definition and checked the function type off of that. Initially, I went through and just made the assumption that everything was ints, and then once I got that working, I actually went back through and implemented the function type definition. In RCO, this is where I had a lot of trouble with how to actually set everything up and link it between the statements and the expressions. I added a function definition in the statements and called the RCO expression on each of the arguments that it had for the return types and the arguments. And I had to add a couple cases for the calls and returns that were new to the function. When I tried implementing a case of if to handle the test 2, it appeared in the RCO expression that's where the if statement popped up, but looking at it now, I probably should have implemented it back down here in the function definition in the statement instead of calling it as the expression. Expose allocation did not change at all. Explicate control was another one that I had a tricky time with, and that was specifically due to the function definition call in here, and looking at it, I may not have set it up right when looping through the arguments and return values, so that may have tripped up some code later on, but it worked okay. Select instruction didn't have to change too much. I had to add a couple assignments and return cases here. Uncover live and a lot of the following definitions, I had to add the uncover live that loops through the dictionary functions, and then it just calls the uncover live underscore in place of that, and that was per suggestions through the class. Build interference, same idea, loop through the definitions of functions. Allocate registers, didn't have to change anything there. The patch instructions didn't have to change. Print x86 I did have to change because now we're going through multiple functions instead of just one global main. So I had to change around where that appeared, where the global main appeared, and then some of the naming for it. So I actually had to add just a check in here to make sure it's calling the right function type, setting the conclusion and jumps right. So here's I had to change where the jump was going. And then in the actual program setup, I had to change a couple of the default parameters. So that was what I went through for the compiler, and I referenced the online compiler and checked it against my own quite often, and that's how I found a lot of those changes. For running the tests, I can successfully run test 1. That works, that passes, and that's the output of it. It's 6. Test 2 does not work because it cannot handle the if statements. And I did try earlier and just ran a recursive. So I did a factorial but did not use a base case and just returned a infinitely recursive function. And it does. It just reaches maximum depth. So that was fun to find. And then For the test, as you saw earlier, it was this add 1 passes, that's fine. Test 2 I was not able to implement, I ran out of time. So, thank you very much.